But I'll tell you what does matter. Oh boy, here's an interesting one. Florida Supreme Court is weighing a prison guard's dismissal for using medical cannabis to treat PTSD. A case filed with the Florida Supreme Court tests whether the Department of Corrections properly fired a corrections officer because of his use of medical marijuana while at work. Florida's first District Court of Appeal upheld the firing, but Samuel Velez Ortiz now argues before the state Supreme Court that the action violates both the Florida Constitution's sanction of medical marijuana and the U.S. Supreme Court's recent rulings establishing a broad right to bear firearms. Pow, pow, pow. The state's Public Employees Relation Commission upheld the firing, reasoning that the medical marijuana use rendered him unqualified to carry a firearm, a condition of his employment under federal law prohibiting the use of the drug. A petition that Velez Ortiz attorneys filed with the state Supreme Court cites 2022 New York's state rifle pistol versus Bruin, in which the justices in Washington established a public right to carry firearms outside of the home for self-protection. Subsequent rulings by a federal judge in Oklahoma and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit upheld the right of sober persons to carry guns even if they smoked marijuana on other occasions. In a quote, this lower court's opinion permits a sanction on medical marijuana patients, which results in loss of employment for being a qualified patient and strips a person's right to bear arms for being a qualified patient. The opinion states because he uses medical marijuana, he cannot lawfully possess a firearm. Each time he does, he's committing a felony. The brief notes that Velez Ortiz was qualified under medical marijuana user because of his PTSD and never worked while under the influence. A random drug test flagged him for cannabis metabolites. Florida's voters back in 2016 added the amendment to the state constitution allowing the use of marijuana to treat a number of conditions, and the state regulates the drug's cultivation and sale. And the state's reply was brief. Filed on Thursday, notes that federal law makes it a felony for prohibited persons to possess a firearm, and prohibited persons include those unlawfully using controlled substances under the Controlled Substances Act, like marijuana. It continues and says, and because Florida law also requires corrections officers to possess good moral character, which necessarily includes not engaging in felonies conduct, the court determined that the petitioner could not use medical marijuana and maintain his certification as a corrections officer. The case of Velez Ortiz versus Florida Department of Corrections, and he reportedly began working for the department back in 2013, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has diagnosed him with combat-related post-traumatic stress disorder, and the record before the Supreme Court is unclear about where Velez Ortiz worked. But, man, oh man, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, Chris Akers, in regards with this corrections officer getting fired for smoking cannabis under unjust, unconstitutional pretense that people that smoke cannabis cannot possess firearms. But this is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do y'all think about this?
Didn't the rapper Rick Ross do the same thing?
What's that?
He was a correctional officer.
Who are you talking about, Rick Ross?
I'm talking about the rapper Rick Ross.
Yeah, he wasn't no weed smoker like that. Stop it. He's an impersonator. Yeah. What do you think about this, Chris? Former law enforcement.
I think it's going to set, I think is one to follow and potentially across, other folks who want to carry firearms and consume cannabis. I think I've said this before. I think it's one thing to currently the standards are like this, right? You could essentially show up hungover, which I would argue is under the effects of alcohol because physically you're affected by it, even though it may not be in your system. You've got a headache, you're slow to react, you're grumpy, didn't sleep well, whatever. And that's okay, right? No one bats an eye today. Seen it, time and time again. But I can't, smoke a joint, go to bed, get a good night's sleep, wake up well rested, not under the effects of cannabis, but it is still in my system. So it's the opposite kind of, right? I think it's going to be one to follow. And I think it potentially could set some interesting precedences around the country.
I wonder, Chris, do you think that the reason that it is almost kind of like a form of basically kind of like planned obsolescence, meaning in the sense that the state needs people drinking so in that way they can get an adequate number of cases to fund the justice system?
Oh, interesting. I'd have to give that some thought.
Yeah, you should
That's
give
a
that
rabbit.
some
Rico's
thought.
got some comments. Rico's got some comments. I know. I can see it.
Yeah.
That's a rabbit go down.
Yeah, geez. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that one, Jay.
I mean, you guys do get quotas, right, Chris? Or you guys did get quotas?
No quotas.
You guys
No,
never.
no, here's the thing. So quotas are illegal. I've never been given a quota, and I would be the first to like push back on that. But there, you do hear stories of agencies that try to wordsmith or weasel language into to get quotas. For sure, you do hear that.
What about the saying, the bigger the bust, the bigger the boost?
Can't say I've used that one myself, but I'm happy to hear you elaborate on it.
Well, I mean, the bigger the bust, the bigger the boost, meaning the bigger the bust a law enforcement officer makes, the higher the promotion that they would get.
No, unfortunately, I'd say I've seen a lot of supervisors. This is one of sort of the issues I have with law enforcement when you kind of peel back the onion layers and get behind the curtain. The people that they promote aren't always the most experienced. So you've got sergeants that are running squads of officers that have never done the work that they're asking those officers to do. I think leadership within law enforcement has a tremendous amount of ground to cover to catch up and get where it needs to be.
Interesting. Any thoughts on this, Dr. T or Dr. Mark? Dr. T's tapping out on this one. Dr. Mark is scratching his head. He doesn't even know how to quantify all this because it's not a formulation. Dr. Mark.
I think individual states are taking a stab at trying to figure this out. I know up here in Vermont, they did have an issue with an employee who was released because they tested positive, but it wasn't affecting his work performance, so they had to take him back. But yeah, this is a shit show that they need to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
My thought is that cannabis broadens the mind, and so to get law enforcers to use cannabis more may really change this issue with police officers and people of color and the abuse that's happening between them.
Yeah, I think if you allow law enforcement to be able to consume, I think there would definitely be a lot less police brutality overall.
It may be a question to ask Chris. Are you aware of any case where someone, say, used in an adult use state like Vermont or Colorado, and then went back to a state that didn't have a cannabis program and lost their job over testing positive?
Oh, great one. I'm not personally aware, but I have to assume that that's happened or is going to happen very soon, right? Absolutely. That's not one that I'm well versed in or know of somebody personally, but I think that that's something we're going to see if we haven't seen it already.
I think you should ask the police union if they have any cases that match that, Chris.
Yeah. Which union?
Any of them, any police union. All of them.
I think didn't we see recently stories out of New Jersey about certain municipalities there? I want to say Jersey City. Yep. About allowing officers to consume, right?
Yep, we covered a story that was an update on that just yesterday, as a matter of fact, Chris.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, on that, we are going to